Get your map out. Page 11. On page 11, if you will look about dead center of the map, you're going to see the word Kernstown. If you go up over there, you see Hayes, Mulligan, and Ely. Behind Ely is an artillery piece. We're just to the, if you're looking at it, just to the right of that. There's battery of West Battery E, 1st West Virginia Light Artillery, the same one that was up on the bluffs in Cool Spring, is going to be in position up here on the morning of July 24th of 1864. So, can you all hear me coming up the hill?
They may not have them there.
Wait till they're up. All right, can everybody hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on Pritchard's Hill. This is going to be the central eminence. It's going to be the reason why there were 3 significant engagements here during the course of the Civil War. This being the first, number 2, the Second Battle of Kernstown. Now, how does this battle erupt? We know that Horatio Wright has left the Shenandoah Valley. Jubal Early is now south of here, about 10 miles south of us, at Fisher's Hill. When he gets back to Fisher's Hill about the 22nd of July, he has a message from General Robert E. Lee defining what should be the next steps of the campaign. Essentially, Jubal Early is told if he stays in the Shenandoah Valley, he must ensure that Horatio Wright's force that's on its way back to Washington, D.C. does not make it back to Richmond and Petersburg. Run. And so he sends out on July 23rd a two brigade cavalry reconnaissance force under General John C. Vaughn. Vaughn will fight with Dufier's cavalry all afternoon, driving them back towards Kernstown, capture some officers and men. They will learn that it is only George Crook's battered Army of West Virginia, reinforced by some garrison troops under the command of Colonel James Mulligan, that is out here. No more than 12 to 14,000 men. Early's army has got some convalescents that have returned, and it's probably up to about 15,000 to 16,000 men. It's had time for all those stragglers to regroup who have been lagging behind throughout the raid into Maryland. He also has his cavalry at its strongest point, 5,000 men. Why? Well, they got a lot of horses. One soldier rode home. They got enough horses in Maryland to mount a whole brigade of cavalry. They also took one brigade that had been dismounted, and its horses had come up from Southwest Virginia, and they remounted at Winchester. That was Vaughn's Tennessean. So he's got a strong cavalry force. They perform well in their reconnaissance, and Early learns that Horatio Wright is on his way back to Washington, D.C. So he wants to stay in the Shenandoah Valley, and instead of going back to the mosquito-infested trenches around Richmond and Petersburg swamps, he's going to take action on July 24th. Early in the morning, he's going to advance northward down the Shenandoah Valley Pike. He will encounter down the intersection of Route 37 in Bardensville, a short distance south, Union cavalry pickets, drive them back. It's going to be Vaughn's brigade spearheading the advance up the Valley Pike. Over to your right, if you look over there, you'll see a school bus. There's a couple school buses. The road they're turning off of, that's the middle road. Our buddy Mudwall Jackson, who's done a pretty good job with the things he's been assigned thus far in the campaign, is advancing northward on the middle road. Several miles east of us, the modern Route 522, the Front Royal Winchester Road, you're going to have 2 large brigades, about 3,000 men under Bradley Johnson and John McCausland, covering the right wing. So Early is advancing towards Kernstown and Winchester on a wide front. Now all of these roads, in essential, Winchester is kind of like the hub of a wagon wheel. And these roads are like spokes coming into the center. So Early's army, these roads are naturally concentrating, many of them coming right in here in the Kernstown vicinity. Now back up at Winchester, we have General George Crook. He's generally competent officer, sometimes sticks to his guns too much and when he's made a faulty assumption. 6 days before this at Cool Spring, we see where he misread and thought that the Confederates only had a small rear guard at Castleman's Ferry, that the entire Confederate army was within shouting distance of the Shenandoah River at that point. That resulted in the defeat of Crook's men. Crook is going to rush. He's going to get some orders. You know, Grant's always given these aggressive orders. Try again in spite of failures. Well, he wants these guys headed back up the valley towards Stanton or then over to Gordonsville to hit the junction of the Orange and Alexandria and the Virginia Central Railroad. Grant's ready to go. And, you know, these orders have filtered back out here. You know, and put yourself south of the enemy and all those things. That stuff wasn't brand new when Sheridan came out here. No, those are orders that were going to Hunter. Hunter is still the department commander, and George Crook has field command here. So Crook, on the 22nd, before this cavalry reconnaissance and everything, and his cavalry under Averell and Duffier, have been in contact with elements of early army every day, the 20th, the 21st, the 22nd, and 23rd. So there's never been a break. Crook realizes that the Confederates are too strong for him with this ragtag beat-up force that he's got out here to go toe-to-toe with these Army of Northern Virginia veterans. So he writes back and says, you know, I have to play it cautious here, and I really can't do too much advancing here until I'm certain that the enemy's made significant detachments back to Richmond. Very prudent. Then on the 22nd, Crook, who hates Averell's troops are going to skirmish southward, and they're going to be involved in an engagement. And Averell reports back there's still a strong force. The 23rd, it's going to be Duffier sending the same reports back, along with this newcomer, a man who's popular, as one officer said, Colonel Mulligan, was popular outside of the Army more so than inside. Other things is that he really has a lack of military experience, although he's a very gallant and brave officer, very flamboyant man, politically connected to the Stephen Douglas wing of the Democratic Party, which led to his appointment of colonel of the Irish Brigade of Chicago, or the 23rd Illinois. So he's here. He's going to be attached to Duffier during this battle initially. And so you've got the Irishman, the Frenchman, and the guy that Crook hates, all telling him that the enemy's out here in force. He doesn't have a lot of confidence in these men. And so, and again, I'm conjecturing here, don't get me wrong. I'm just thinking, why did Crook suddenly, when he's getting these reports, dismiss them? And the only thing I can come to conclude is that he didn't trust the guys making the reports, and so therefore he started to disregard them. And this will continue into the morning of the 24th. So on the morning of the 24th, you have Mulligan with about 1,200 to 1,500 men in a small brigade encamped around Pritchard House. Mulligan himself would be up here with his headquarters battalion, headquarters staff, and the 200-some men of the Irish Brigade up here in this very area. It was a Sunday morning, and Mulligan was a devout Catholic, and they didn't have a priest, so he's trying to have some prayer services and do some things early in the morning to honor their religious beliefs, when the sounds of musketry break out when the Confederate cavalry is driving Duffier back. So he begins to ready his men for battle. And Mulligan's maintaining a calm composure, trying to calm some of the younger officers. Because again, he'd been in the Army for several years, but he'd never really been in any serious open field engagement. So Mulligan eventually is going to advance his men down to the stone wall. Out beyond where those houses, you see those houses in the distance, there's some of that area was a slight woods there. The area where you see those industrial buildings, that was wooded, called Barden's Woods. Vaughan's brigade is initially going to be holding a skirmish line there, while Early's infantry advances towards Kernstown. Mulligan's troops are going to advance out the building straight through the trees. There's a green roof on it. That's Opequon Presbyterian Church. It's showing just to the left of the word Kernstown on your map. And you got to look through the trees. You're going to see like a log white building with a dark roof. Then right behind it, there's the church itself with the taller green roof. We'll be down at the stone wall before we leave it. You'll be able to see it better if you don't make it. But they advance past that towards Barden's Woods. They're skirmishing for a couple hours. Then late morning, probably about 11 o'clock, suddenly the volume of fire coming out of those woods and the accuracy of the fire has changed. And that is John Gordon's sharpshooters have taken over the front. And Vaughan's infantry is going to shift over to the east side of the Valley Pike. Mulligan's going to try and find cover for his men out in that field. They cannot. They fall back to the stone wall, which at the time lined the road the entire way out. This road mirrors that road, but I think in some areas it doesn't exit in the same area that it probably did during the Civil War, but you get the general effect. So he's got this small brigade, and he sends his nephew, his chief staff officer, Lieutenant James Nugent, the brother of Mulligan's wife, who is pregnant just across the Potomac River in Cumberland, Maryland, with their third daughter. She tries to be as close to him as she can. And what happens then when Nugent goes back to Winchester to Crook's headquarters reporting a strong force of the enemy in his front is that Crook says to him, "Why, General," he says, "well, I haven't heard as many as a half a dozen shots from the front this morning." And Nugent shoots back, says, "Well, if you were a little closer to the front, you might have heard as many as a dozen." And that gets Crook's goat, and he says, "Young man, I'll deal with you tomorrow. Right now, you go down there and you tell Colonel Mulligan to instantly and persistently advance and drive off those bushwhackers." So Crook was angry there, but his got quickly, because he says, "Well, you know what? There might be something more going on." So he's going to send Colonel Thoburn's division down. Thoburn's division is actually already on the way down to cover Sandy Ridge out in that direction, primarily behind you, where the first primary action of 1st Kernstown takes place. Most importantly, he's going to send Rutherford B. Hayes down to take position on the other side of the road. You see that warehouse facility. And he's going to develop a plan of attack. Crook has concluded that there's a strong force, perhaps a division of infantry in those woods, supported by cavalry on either flank. His plan of attack is going to be that Averill's going to move down the Front Royal Road and get to the crossroads down at Newtown and come up behind, the small force. Just pretend that there's just Gordon and some cavalry on this map. And so Averill's going to try and get behind them. Mulligan's to move straight ahead and engage Gordon head on in the woods. In the meantime, Thoburn's going to sweep down the ridge and crush Gordon's western flank, while Hayes moves in and collapses his eastern flank, while Gordon is fixated on that. So we have a fish thinking it's going to eat a little guppy here. But then Jubal Early's this giant whale, who we see here, he has the whole thing covered here. And in short order, as Crook attempts to execute his plan, Jubal Early is going to outflank the flank E. So we're going to walk down there and talk about some of the tactical detail of this. But Jubal Early's initial plan for delivering his assault, he fought here in the early stages of the Second Battle of Winchester in 1863, and he used a flank movement to Sandy Ridge to drive off Union resistance from this very spot. Well, at that time he was dealing with a couple brigades and regiments on each side. Now he's got armies. So he's going to take Stephen D. Ramseur's division and order it to march up to Sandy Ridge and to launch a flank attack from there. Before he's able to launch that attack, however, John C. Breckinridge, who's a wing commander, he's in command of John Gordon and Gabe Gordon's division. Breckinridge at the Battle of Stones River on July 2nd of 1863 had been ordered by Braxton Bragg to launch a headlong attack against a position that the Army of the Cumberland was holding. It hadn't been properly scouted out, and his division was massacred by massed Union artillery. From that point forward, Breckinridge had always made it a point to conduct a personal reconnaissance of the position before putting his men into harm's way. If you look out there in the distance, you can see a tall white building. I feel like every time I come here, there's a new tall white industrial building somewhere around here. Beyond there, there's also some kind of cement towers next over to the right. But behind that building, there's a ridge over there, and Breckinridge is going to go out there, and he's going to see that there's a ravine that's going to allow him to come right up on behind the flank of Hayes, as Hayes is going to be advancing forward on the east side of the pike. So Breckinridge will lead Worden's division into position so that it's going to be forming its line of battle perpendicular to the Union line of battle. And he's going to be concealed behind that ridge, and he's just waiting to see. They're going to wait to see what the Union does. Well, Crook is going to come down here, and he's going to send a staff officer down here to make sure that Mulligan and Hayes, that there's no dilly-dallying. Well, what happens here is that Rutherford B. Hayes, he's getting some reports back from some of his staff. Again, Worden has driven off the supporting cavalry. There was a small detachment of Duvier's division over there on that ridge, and they get driven off. And then Hayes gets the reports that there's Confederates up there. Well, all that was on top of the ridge was a few skirmishers at that point. But they felt certain that there was a larger force that would soon be coming. So Colonel Mulligan, who's down here behind the stone wall, he gets the orders that he's supposed to attack in conjunction with Hayes. He rides his horse out, and he took his coat off. It's a hot, sultry summer day here, and he's got nothing on but his green battle shirt. And he was a flamboyant, known for his Irish patriotism. And he's riding out, and the two men meet at the Valley Pike, and Hayes sees the green and says, Colonel Mulligan, I presume. And he says, well, you must be Colonel Hayes. So the two men begin comparing notes. Mulligan had just been told that there was a report of troops moving up onto Sandy Ridge, which was Ramseur's division, and he shares those interesting facts with Hayes. Hayes says, well, I'm getting similar reports from my troops about the ridge over yonder on our left flank. And the staff officer from Crook arrives, and they point out the situation, and the staff officer says, your orders are to go forward. The two men look at each other, and they say, well, at this point, with these Confederates all over our flanks, we may as well go forward as any other direction, because we're gone up either way. So at that point, they will move forward. Mulligan's division will go out beyond the church, and they will be fighting with troops, sharpshooters lining the edge of the woods from Gordon's division. And they're getting closer, and Gordon's men aren't coming out of the woods. But what's happening is Snowburn's division is starting to move slowly across Sandy Ridge to join up and conform to the attack. But the situation is going to change over on the east side of the Valley Pike. As Rutherford B. Hayes, you see that arrow, as he's moving forward, he's going to get down into some low ground there, and Worden's men are going to charge up from the top of that hill and open fire. They're going to all aim their rifles at the left flank. The left flank was held by a regiment, the 36th Ohio, Crook's regulars, his first command. He had drilled them, and they were one of the finest outfits. They performed well at Antietam, Chickamauga, Chattanooga during the Southwest Virginia raids in 1864. They were a hard bit in a small regiment, but very veteran in its cadre. There was no other regiment with its resume and training in the Army of West Virginia as the 36th Ohio. It's got about 250 men or so in its ranks. Well, it was commanded that day by Major Jewett-Palmer. He had been on those battlefields at Antietam and Chickamauga. And when the Confederates opened fire, all focusing in on the battle flag and flank of the 36th Ohio, Palmer, who would be seriously wounded and hauled to the rear in a rickety wagon, wrote that that was the hottest, another one of those comments about that's his hottest spot of the war. He had never been under a heavier fire. The 36th Ohio is going to quickly melt underneath that fire, and they will fall back. The whole entire brigade, 3 of the regiments, the 23rd Ohio, the 5th West Virginia, are going to start streaming in confusion back towards Pritchard's Hill. Only one regiment, the rookies of the 13th West Virginia Infantry, who are up close to the Valley Pike, they're going to turn their line right across from where that Saturn dealership is, where we turned in, and they're going to face there and offer some resistance to Wharton's advance. The rest of them have been broken and are streaming. That break continues. Mulligan, most of Mulligan's brigade starts falling back in confusion to the stone wall. Mulligan gives the order, and the brigade here, the 10th West Virginia and the 23rd Illinois, will fall back here. The West Virginians, the 10th West Virginia, would line the current surviving stone wall from about where the white building is all the way out to the end of this wall. The 23rd Illinois would extend it out a short distance, probably about to where that brushy area of trees extended in the lane. And now John Gordon's division's going to start to attack. Thoburn, Crook now, the light bulb goes up over Crook's head about the time that first massive roar of musketry from Wharton's division, and he promptly orders Thoburn to pull back to Bowers Hill at the south end of Winchester. This is going to be a lifesaver for Crook because it's going to provide a rear guard for this shattered army to rally on. So right there with that, we've got Mulligan's men lined up. Hayes is retreating in confusion. 13th West Virginia on the other side of the pike holding out in an apple orchard. Now Gordon's division is coming forward. Part of Ramseur's division's charging down in this way, and it looks like an utter disaster. So we're going to change position down to the bottom of the hill here in a minute, but before we do so, I'll take a few questions here. All right.
Where would you think the left and the right end of Wharton's line on that bridge approximately?
So Gordon's left flank probably extends from that white building. See, there's no cement towers there, just beyond there, you know. So.
William McKinley and his errand.
Oh, no, don't, you're getting ahead of yourself, sir. I'm only here to refresh and any confusion about what has transpired thus far.
Hayes was with the 36th.
Hayes is, the question is, where's Rutherford B. Hayes? Yes, he's with that's part of his brigade, that's his left flank. So Hayes is down there getting smashed. And I don't mean he's having a good time with a bottle of whiskey either.
Artillery battery is still up here, correct?
The artillery battery, there's still two guns. They will
have any impact on Wharton from this distance?
Yes, this artillery fire will hit Wharton's. The question was, does this artillery impact Wharton's division? The answer is yes, it does. In fact, Colonel Forsberg, commander of one of Wharton's brigades, wrote in his journal, he said, if the Yankee infantry had behaved with as much gallantry as the Yankee artillery, we might have had a much more difficult time at Kernstown. So they were very respectful. That battery is only about, from what I can find, there's only that one battery that's seriously engaged here. It's hard to. Dennis?
What gap is that?
That's Ashby's. Snickers is back up there. All right. Well, let's head down. I'm gonna jump in here. So head down to the stone wall. There's a sign right in front of the stone wall.